what hairstyle should you wear even at the workplace. But we'll get into a lot of different things. But I definitely want to introduce Miss Terry Barnett. She is the owner and founder of Core Essence. It is a intentional leadership and meaningful impact company. She'll explain a bit more in a second. But Terry, thank you so much for being here. We've had a lot of great conversations. Would love for you to introduce yourself and kick us off.
Hi, everyone. My name is Terry Barnett. As Nigel said earlier, I am the founder of Core Essence by Terry Barnett. My company is a startup company, but it's a conference, it's a meeting facilitation and strategic leadership company. And my focus right now is to help people in the job force, be it leaders, primarily leaders, to pause, reset, and reflect on how they lead and how they show up in the workplace. A lot of times we bring a lot of our technical skills, but this is focusing more on how you show up from a social emotional point of view and the tools that you can utilize that will allow you to be more productive, to communicate better, to show up and be more present, to cut down on stress and burnout in the workplace.
Now, I know one of your topics that you like to hone on is really the phrase reset and realign. What does that mean to you, and how do you see that showing up in a workplace environment?
You know, a lot of stress shows up at work. We have stress from our personal lives. We have stress from meeting deadlines. It depends on what line of work you're in. If it's in education, if it's a corporate setting, corporate, technical, nonprofit, there's a lot that people seem to be holding on these days, especially since the pandemic era. People come with a lot more stress, a lot more traumas, a lot more issues. And so what ends up happening is that humanistic or social emotional way people show up in the workplace can impact how they progress. It
Mm,
impacts how they actually can, get a job through interviewing process. It impacts you about how to communicate with leadership. If you're a leader, how to communicate with your team, how to collaborate. And so this process that I usually teach people is to give them tools so they can show up better. And
mm,
one of the tools that I really, really focus on heavily is the art of awareness, personal awareness, and then reflection. And a lot of times, stressors, be it internal stressors or external stressors, are the things that show up that impact us the most.
mm,
And so, with the climate that we're living in now, with the economy being like it is, and especially young people coming out of this is graduation season, as you know, and a lot
mhm.
of people have really big dreams about what the next steps are. And unfortunately, it's taken a lot longer. I think I've heard you on one of your podcasts talking about how long it actually took you to get offer a position. It's anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And most times right now is really a lot longer than that. And so a
Exactly.
lot of times there's a lot of internal disappointment and
Mm,
loss of self and directions that people take on. And that mindset gets in the way of how you plan and you strategize to move along further in your job search or even in your career. I know a lot of people, my son graduated with you from
yep.
North Carolina A&T, and I remember that during that pandemic season, a lot of people got great jobs. You know, they
Yep.
got a lot of great job offers at Google and Microsoft, and then all of a sudden, the jobs are no longer there.
Mm,
So you came out feeling hopeful. What do you deal with those feelings that you have, and how do you not beat yourself up?
mm,
So what I do is address the elephant in the room, which are actually the stressors, and then give you tools to help you to look at yourself, to ask yourself the real questions so that you can move along and go on. Because the job I had when I got out of college is surely not the job I have now. And
for
so
sure.
seasons will come and seasons will go. But the main thing is, how do we maintain a positive self image and a positive self to get through all of the minefields that you're going to have to deal with in this economy and this job market?
I mean, it's so relevant, and I think everybody either can relate or knows someone that's been laid off. Government shutdowns. There's so many different things going on. Can you
Mhm,
touch on and
mhm,
especially in our culture, there's a deep connection between what you do and your identity and who you are. And a lot of times when you see an
Absolutely.
instance where someone gets fired, I mean, it's hard on anybody, right? Lost a job, there's a level there. But
Mhm.
there's some instances where it feels like, for lack of better words, like divorce, like in terms of somebody
Right.
loses a job, in terms of the
Mhm.
emotional
Right.
toll. Can you speak to the identity and then just maybe how to disconnect and still see your value even when things professionally aren't always going the best?
We call those identity disruptors because a lot of who we are, even starting from graduating from high school and being admitted into a college, that's when you start identifying your career goals. Then, if you were the valedictorian, or even if you weren't, what school do you go to? How
Right.
well do you perform in school? And then the
Right.
ultimate goal, especially in our community, there is a very high premium put on where did you go to school? Now,
Mm,
what's your major? And what are you going to do? What are the next steps that you're going to do? And so if you don't hit those marks, which the way our culture is set up is you hit those marks, you go to college for 4 to 6 years, then the idea is that you are to get some type of entry level job. Now if you don't get an entry level job and you find a difficult, and then if you can't get an entry level job, then you get a job and you're underemployed.
right.
So there is a sense of having a loss of direction. You start questioning your self worth. So, my suggestion is the first thing that you need to do is really, when I say pause,
Mhm.
reset, realign yourself, I'm really talking about your taking the time and journaling. And I
Yeah.
practice a lot of, when I say self awareness, and mindfulness is one of those words that people look at, oh, it's like foo foo, fluffiness. But
Right.
I'm going to say self awareness, like the
Mm,
act of being self aware,
mm,
sitting down, pen and paper, get some type of notebook, and really just stop. First of all, just learn to breathe and to relax yourself and to sit in a place where you can really do some self examining and really sit with what do I feel? Like,
mm,
how am I feeling at this moment? Am I actually, you start grieving the part of you that you thought you were going to be in, that you thought that you were going to have. But if you sit down and you really write your feelings are out, you start journaling and you start saying, remembering what you thought you want to be, but where are you right now? Because there's really nothing wrong with where you are. And I always see power in setbacks.
yeah.
The setbacks are really preparing you for taking a different road, the road less traveled.
Yeah.
Or we always want to take the same road because everybody else has already set that path.
Yeah.
But I find that a lot of the things that you do in life, regardless of if it's when you're graduating from college, on through life, you're gonna all those lessons you learn always end up supporting you if you're sitting at the table, you're meeting somebody for the first time, telling them about yourself, and your lessons are going to come out. Interviewing for a job, all of those are really important. But when you sit down, you practice that act about what you're feeling. Are you embarrassed? Are you frustrated? Are you discouraged? Are you tired of just sending out, you may have sent out 200 resumes.
Right. It's a lot.
And so really sitting back and just really being aware of like what you're really feeling right now.
Mm,
And you really write it out because when you see it on paper and you read it out loud, it really lets you know that it may not be as bad. It feels intense and you feel sadness, but that real act helps you to just stop and say it's okay. It's not as bad as I thought it was.
for sure. For sure.
So,
It's like
yes.
it's tough, right? Because you're talking about type A people, winners, people that have done well historically throughout their career.
Hmm.
And it
Absolutely.
is tough,
Absolutely.
you lose a job or there's certain situations where you can't get one. And now it's like, hey, am I a bad person or am I not smart enough?
Hmm.
And those doubts start to creep into
Hmm.
your mind. Is this like an underinvestment in corporate America, or do you believe that this is kind of how corporate wants people to think, to not necessarily be able to reset and do those things at a high level?
You know what? My background is I'm in education. I'm a school administrator.
Okay.
And what I find that when people are dealing with the bottom line, they're not concerned about who you are as a person. They're not vested in dealing with the social emotional aspect of how their employees think or feel. Everybody is mostly concerned about the bottom line. If
Mm,
you're in a school setting, what are the test scores? What's the graduation rate? How many people, if you're in a post-secondary, how many people have we enrolled? How many people have dropped out? You're thinking about the bottom line and money. Corporation is the same. They don't take, they might have some of the employee support groups, and you can go in the workroom, and there's a number for you to call if you're having some psychological issues, or you're going through depression. But that's where their responsibility ends. That's
right.
why I say it's really, really important on people to start taking stock on themselves. And
Mm,
when you take stock on yourselves, you're not only thinking about what you're feeling, you feel what you're feeling in your
right.
body. Where is it showing up? If it's manifesting in forms of anxiety, is it manifesting in the form of depression where you can't move? Then you need to be willing enough and mindful enough to think that I need some help beyond myself. But
Mm,
while you're in the beginning phases of it, there are things that you can do to help you figure out how to move forward. There was a time, I've been in education for a long time, but I took a break from education because I was an elementary school teacher, and I said, I don't like this at all. But what I just didn't like doing was teaching elementary school. I love high school and older. I just couldn't do the elementary kids.
yeah.
So what I did was I read this book. It was a famous book back then called "What Color Is My Parachute?"
Mm,
Because I knew that there was something else that I needed to be doing. And I took 2 weeks to sit and do a reflective practice and start doing personal examination of myself. Like, what are my interests? There's your aptitude, and then there's your aptitude, things that you're technically trained to do, but then there's intrinsic qualities about yourself that you like this. Maybe when you were in school, you were a great event planner,
right.
but yet you became a lawyer, or maybe you're a fantastic writer, or you're somebody creative, but that wasn't a path that your parents thought that were not going to spend money on you to be an artist because they didn't see the value in you earning money for that.
Mm,
So during this reflective period, you also get a chance to observe the story that you're telling yourself about yourself. If you were the A type star athlete, academic person, you were in the top 10 percentile in your class, you're telling yourself a story about who you think you are. But when you sit back and you examine yourself and you really think about who I am. So what color is my parachute? What I discovered was I like doing event planning.
mm,
And so I launched my own company of being an event planner. And, I had moderate success for it. But, being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart, it's not for everybody.
oh,
But those skills that I learned then, just trying to be an event planner, I've carried them over and I use them even now, with doing the work that I do, being a leadership coach and a meeting facilitator. I have to coordinate, I do retreats for
mm,
leaders. And so I have to coordinate that. I have to outreach. I have to put the flyers together. I have to, market what I'm doing to get people, participants in that seat. That act of being an event planner is helping me to land where I am right now. All of
mm,
it matters. So, in the observation, the story that you're telling yourself, like you said, the stories you tell yourself, I was the greatest. So you started
right.
saying like, now I'm behind everybody else. I'm not good
Mm,
enough. I used to think I was smart. I was smart in high school, but when you get to college, you're in a room a whole lot of people equally as smart as you, if not smarter. So you started doubting yourself and you started questioning yourself. And then there's also the piece about your family disappointment. My mother and father, or my mother had a single mother. She had spent all this money to put me through college. And here I am not able to repay my loans back, pay my mother. So you start holding a lot of that against yourself. And
mm,
so then here again with the journaling, you have to face your fears. Ask
right.
yourself, is this a fact or is this a fear? Am I
Mm.
really disappointing my mother? Your mother knows about the economy. She listens to the news. She's going to the grocery store. She's definitely buying gas. So
Right.
she knows it's hard for her child. So let some of that go off of you.
Right.
That's what I would recommend.
We definitely put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and it's natural,
Mm,
right? You know,
exactly.
pressure makes diamonds. You want to do well for the people that you love. You talked about a lot of different things in terms of
Mhm,
the identity, the ability to reflect, and I want to kind of talk about, you know, what are maybe what is the importance of having a framework, you know, when you face disappointment,
mhm,
specifically
mhm,
professionally. You know, I even think about it like you mentioned, hey, you do well in school. I mean, people that are in these workspaces, they've done well throughout their whole life, and then when they get
mhm,
hit with a major event, it's like it's tough. And one thing that I'll add is I think my field is a little naturally better in terms of taking hits and disappointments. I do sales. We're wired a little
mhm,
bit different where the average person emotionally can't handle getting told no 100 times a day. You know, they'll
mhm,
crumble in
mhm,
a couple of weeks.
mhm,
But that is
mhm.
very rare. And so when I think about everybody else who gets hit with that no or gets hit with that disappointment, what is going through people's minds, and then what are some ways that they could be better in terms of a toolkit to help in those situations when they get fired, when they have a hard boss, when they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves. What do they need to do?
I think that one of the things you have to do, we talked about your identity, but this is the time that you need to do some self discovery of yourself
Mm,
because there's more than one path to your same goal. If you think about, I think about like monuments, which are, if you live in a city like Washington, D.C., there's so many streets that come to that monument. So there are multiple ways of getting to the same goal.
mm,
And if the way that you have been doing it does not work, then you need to come up with some other things like you know, I believe in reskilling myself. I take classes every single solitary year, and
mm,
I'm learning something that I think can add to me. This may be the time to possibly look at like the program Coursera, which you can go
right.
and take some classes and get some type of certifications, or maybe examine is the path, the trajectory you thought you were on the right thing. Go volunteer. Go
Mm,
look at some of the things that you don't normally do for yourself. As
mm,
far as you don't want your job should not ultimately define who you are. Now I know you definitely need to have money. That goes without saying. But maybe this is a time for you to kind of do a reset. And a reset meaning that you take the time to look at the goals that you have. And you should always have some goals, but there might need to be a pivot that you might need to have to come up with and not look at this as a time of failure, but maybe as a time of transition. Now I look at what you do. You say you're in sales, but you also do, and I'm not sure if these are two different items, but coming up with a way to develop having like a gig economy right now is really big. And I look at people and I read about people, they lost this job, they lost their job. There are, content creators and this. There are things that you might can do in the meantime while you're getting to that. There's always teaching.
yeah.
I remember sitting in A&T's orientation,
Hmm.
and I saw all the people sitting in the engineering department. I said, oh, that's nice. All the people sitting in biology department. Everybody wants to be a doctor. There were like 5 people sitting in education. I was like, oh my God. But what I know as an educator, that everybody's not going to make it in those other departments,
Right.
and
Right.
they need to transition over there.
To
And
teaching.
sometimes just taking a different path for a while to get yourself to transition through
Hmm.
these tough seasons. And so I think this technically warrants a tough season that you might have to pivot right now and look at some other things to do. And honestly, look at yourself in the mirror and have some really positive affirming conversations with yourself about who
Yeah.
you are at this moment, not who you thought you were going to be. You still can do that. But I feel that we get too caught up into the image that we think that we're going to have. And of course, social media does not help
No.
anybody when it comes,
No.
because you think people's lives are this, that, and the other. And I do believe firmly in, you need to do like you need to put it on pause
Yeah.
because that's
Cleanse.
the most a cleanse, right? It's one of the most deceptive things out there. And also, what are you saying to yourself? What kind of conversations are you having? We're probably our number one hater.
Right. Yeah.
So change your rhetoric, change what you say. look at the positives. If you belong to, I guess, a church or any type of organizations, to take leadership roles in that, so that you can start continuing to develop your skill while you work some of the jobs that you may have to work. And a lot of people, retail and food service is really big with a lot of people. And I know people who have worked those jobs for a couple of years before they were able to land
That's true.
a much better job.
That's true. I'm hearing that there's
Oh,
always options. And one thing that I've
mhm.
seen, because I'm a resume coach, so I'm talking to people that are
Yes.
leaving a job or trying to get a job. I'm saying sometimes when it comes to pivoting, people are way too indecisive off the pivot. When it's like, hey, okay, I lost this job or I'm trying to get into this
Mhm.
field, and I ask somebody,
Mhm.
hey man, what do you want to do? It's almost like
Mhm.
sports. Like you're in the weight room training. Hey man, what are you training for? I think lacrosse, I think basketball, maybe football. It
Mhm.
won't work. And so a lot of
Mhm.
times you may not always know exactly the role, the position. That's fine, but you at least maybe know the industry. You at least know the overall
Yes.
vision, and you have some sort of
Right.
direction. And a lot of
Mhm.
times you mentioned reset and pivot, but sometimes people are just like thinking too much. There's just too much thinking and not enough like, okay, let me think. For me, I say I'll give myself like I've had in situations where a job didn't work out and I'm upset about it. I feel like it wasn't right, all the emotions that we all feel. I give myself maybe I don't know how you feel about this. Let me know if this isn't the best. I give myself 2 days to be upset about it and really feel it. Now, I may be
Mhm.
upset next week, but most of my effort is towards execution on whatever the game plan is. I give myself the first 48 hours to really be upset. I may call my homies, may call my pops. That's my method, right? Because I can't
Mhm.
go 2, 3 months still complaining about something that happened and I'm not doing anything about it. Is that like, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think you're like that because you're in sales.
True,
You don't have time to just to do that. I mean, everybody's going to be really different.
true.
I think that one of the things that people don't necessarily do is they're in their heads too much.
Mm,
And when you ruminate, you overthink it, and you're here. But there, in Asian culture, there's something called the dantian,
mm,
which is really the core, which is like your from your stomach. That's where your solar plexus are. If you can feel what's happening there, and the way that you feel, that's like you said that gut feeling. So you need to sit with your dantian, and you need to listen to what is really there. The reason why I call my company Core Essence, because
mm,
there's a core that is part of my dantian, that is who I really am internally, who I really am spiritually, who I really am intellectually, and connectiveness. My connectiveness is there. It's not here. But my mind and my heart work together. But in your gut, it tells you, it's your wheelhouse. It tells you who you really, really are. And so the way I get in contact with mine personally is I walk in the park. I walk in
mm,
Rock Creek Park. Some people may go to the gym, some people may run, but when I go into that park, I always say you set an intention. An intention is this is what I need an answer for today.
mm,
And what I need, and you don't think about it real hard, but when you quiet yourself and you quiet your mind, you quiet all the rumblings that are going inside you, when you go into nature and you walk, you're going to come out with an answer.
mm,
Now, if you're an artist, it may come from I'm painting. It's about the act of being solitary and being quiet so that the core essence of who you are can actually come out and answer the questions for you. We all have that gift. It is all intuitively in there.
true.
Now, if you have to, if you do deep breathing exercises, it calms the mind down. If you do qigong, tai chi, karate, whatever, box, all of that is to get all of that residual energy out so that you can calm yourself down so that you can actually listen. Being
Mm,
in nature, letting your feet touch the ground is probably one of the best ways to center and align yourself so that you can learn to listen. You can go to church and pray and get inspired and get answers. I absolutely believe that. But there have to be other mechanisms in which you use. Now, you said something that I thought was important because you have to have a strategy. You have to come up with, if you decide you have to do. I used to go online a lot, and I used to do these little surveys like,
mm,
who Who am
Right.
I? What's your sign?
Right.
What's your interest? Who you are? Myers Briggs is a
Yep.
good one.
Yep.
Um, Strengths Finders by Gallup Strength Finders really tells you who you intrinsically are. A lot of times we pick careers that are not really who we are.
Mm.
I had a friend who majored in biology who hates blood. And she majored in biology because a friend majored in biology. She's a
Right.
highly intelligent, creative person, but she didn't pick the right major for the right
Mm.
reasons that suited who she was. So you really do have to align yourself with who you intuitively are, where your strengths are, what you really want to do, where you will grow and blossom. Once you figure that out, you can center the industry, and then within the industry there's so many roles.
Mm.
So I think that you need to come up with a strategy of, one, if I don't know who I am, let me just do some of these little online trends, tests, and there's going to be a pattern. It's
Yep.
going to tell you, if you're an introvert, I don't think you're a good salesperson. That is not
No.
going to go
No, it's
along
tough.
with it.
That's
There are
tough.
different attributes of your personality that need to go with the job.
Right.
If you hate talking to people, you can't, there's certain jobs you can't, but if you are a person who loves being out there, being engaged with people, being behind a desk is not going to serve your soul whatsoever.
Mm.
So you have to connect with, strategize, like, one, figure out who I am. Two, do the research about the different jobs. Go and talk to people. you know
True.
Coffee shops are great these days. They're great places to go and talk to people. And I know that it's challenging for people who are always on their phone and texting to have conversations. The
Yeah.
art of
Just
conversation needs to be the art of conversation. And there are books on the art of conversation to learn how to get out there and how to network. And it is important to talk to people face to face.
yes. Yes.
Then, and start developing your soft skills.
Mm.
Soft skills, if you ask employers the number one thing that people are missing, they will tell you soft skills are number one.
Mm. And these generations are so different, right? You think about maybe when you were coming up, the challenges that you face versus the current challenges today,
Hmm.
because the rise of technology, social media, and the attention span has dropped. Most people struggle in conversations. A fun fact: a lot of
Right.
people or kids under the age of maybe 22, one, have never done a job interview in person, which is crazy. Never put on a suit and tie
Hmm.
and done a job
Hmm.
interview in person. A little bit unrelated, but on like a social level, a lot of kids have never in person, asked somebody on a date. Like in your time, that's just what you did. Hey, you look good. What are you doing on Friday? But like to a young man today or young lady today, that's absolutely terrifying. And so I bring that up where it's like, if you are half decent socially, right? What is the book? How to Win and Influence Friends. I
Hmm.
feel like you would shine a little bit, having the great listening ability, asking those discovery questions, being
Hmm.
somebody that's very attentive, eye
Hmm.
contact, etc. And to your point, find those things that come easy to you, more difficult than others. Controversial, but I'm a fan of taking less money for less stress. Now, I never say
Hmm.
cut yourself short, but if it's the difference between 10K, 8K for the year, and you're more happier, writing blogs or being at a smaller company as opposed to doing something you have no interest in, but a lot of that's not something that's pushed a lot. And I wanted to
Right.
get your thoughts there in terms of how to navigate that, because a lot of times, as you mentioned, it's about the presence and the image, the aesthetics of what it would look like on social media, as opposed to where our heart and soul truly lies.
You know, when I moved to this area, I had applied for jobs, and of course, education would have been the number one thing, and I did apply. And because I had that meeting and event company, I got offered a very nice job as the director of catering for the Spy Museum.
Nice.
And I mean, compared to a teacher, I was probably going to make about $40,000 more But the difference was not only was I going to make $40,000 more, but because the people that were working for me would make sales, I got I was able the to get I guess compensation from their sales.
Nice
But I had to
commission.
think about I had 2 sons. My husband, worked internationally, and I felt like I did not want to sacrifice my children for the sake of money. I was not interested in having someone else raise my children for
Yeah.
me while I was out making that money. Now, you know, I eventually made that money and more, but it took me some time. So yes, I agree with you have to look at your quality of life is important, lifestyle, what do you want? How do you want to live? And I know environments are very important. I know your generation is very much more aware of, which I commend about work life balance, this
Yeah.
environment versus another environment. But I do think that there are some negatives to being in an online virtual world because you're losing that human connection. And I think that that lack of human connection causes a lot more mental health issues. It causes
Mm.
people not to learn how to socialize. And so it is, and you said something really important. You read a book. Reading a book is becoming a lost art. You might read a snippet, but reading a book is not something, even when they do standardized tests, they have you write a paragraph. It's just everything has been I don't want to use the word dumbed down, but it has been dumbed
Yeah.
down. And I think that that is a problem that we are losing,
Yeah.
um, that we're losing so much of what made us excel and make you to be more competitive than somebody else. So I hope there's a shift coming. I really, really hope there's a shift coming with people being willing to read. And the idea of writing something is like a loss. Writing can cursive. Kids cannot read cursive.
No.
They don't even know how to address an envelope, even though people don't. I mean, just little simple things that
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
That they're becoming is a lost art.
Yeah, and not that it is the kid's fault at all. It's really just the
Oh
setup
no,
of
it's not their fault. They were taught by the people, who taught them.
right, the setup of society. Now I know we're wrapping up in a
Mhm,
few. Like one thing that's
mhm,
interesting to me when you think about leadership, there's never any There's classes on sports. There's classes on engineering, maybe a little bit of sales. You don't see a lot of
mhm.
classes or just education around leadership, but there's captains, managers, leaders in almost any industry. What are your thoughts there? Are people natural born leaders, and how do people develop those leadership skills over time?
Well, it's funny you say that because my master's in educational leadership. So, but I do feel
But
that
not
there
every
are.
manager, I'm sorry to cut you off, not every manager
No,
has
I
that
mean,
qualification.
not everybody. That's okay. But I'm getting ready to go there. I'm getting ready. I know. I'm just saying. I just happen to have that degree.
Sure,
But
sure.
what I'm going to say is, with that, I always had this debate in my head, and I remember my college advisor said that um, she said that leaders can be taught. I don't agree.
Mm,
I feel like okay, leaders can be taught, but good leaders, I think that there are people who are great analytical minds. There
mm,
are people who are great, the rah-rah people that pull people together. And when you look at the various frames of leadership, there are people who are the celebratory people, which has its place. They have their place. But
right.
I think that there are people that are natural born leaders,
Yeah.
that they have those intrinsic qualities in them that allow them to mobilize people and to visualize a to have a vision for how they want a department to go or how they want an idea to be developed. And I've seen a lot of people be in some high level leadership positions that are not good leaders.
No. No.
They
Smart,
they
but
and they are smart. They have PhDs, and I've
right.
seen them. But I do believe that really good leaders, there are characteristics that make a really good leader. And yes, education can make them even better to give them more strategies, to give you more to give you more insight around some things that you hadn't thought about, especially like ideology, strategies. I think that you learn those, but how to implement them and mobilize people, I personally believe that you have to have that in you.
I agree to an extent, but also I would push and say that one quality that great leaders have is the
Hmm.
ability to create other great leaders.
Oh
You
yeah,
can even
yes.
translate this to sports. One thing that
Hmm.
of the biggest coaches in the world that they're really proud of, and even let's use teaching as well. Teaching and
Hmm.
coaching, they're very similar. My dad taught me this. How you know someone's a good teacher and a good coach? Who grows up to
Hmm.
be a teacher? Who leaves the sport and also becomes a coach? Well, I do agree with
Right.
you that's in them, right? There's a lot of qualities that are in them, but you also have
Hmm.
to see it, get inspired, right? Even you can say a pastor who becomes a pastor in the congregation. Great
Right.
leaders
Right.
create other great leaders. And I think in a
Hmm.
workplace you see that as well. We have a good manager and over 4, 5, 6 years, I mean, this person became a manager, this person became a manager, and they all are
Right.
learning and have similar qualities. And then even in the interview space, it's like, the job market is tough. But one thing I love when I see people make decisions quick, not rush, but quick. A great leader, I don't need to talk to you 15 times to decide whether you can do the job. I could probably have two to
Hmm.
three conversations. Hey, this person can do it, I don't think that they can, and here's why. So that would be my pushback on that, but it's interesting that we don't have enough
Well,
leaders, to be honest.
I think that you see attributes in people that you can develop and they are responsive to what you have
Mm,
to say, and then you can mobilize them and then they can model what you do in the way you've done it, you know?
for
And
sure.
so, I mean, leadership goes two ways. There are people who follow people who are not that good, and then they model the same behavior and they're leaders. But
True.
if you see that I think that there are probably core attributes in people that make them a good leader, a really good
Mm,
leader.
interesting. And then how does
Yeah.
that, I know we're wrapping up here, reflect into your work? You're coming in doing leadership coaching and development at the professional level.
Mhm.
What are you seeing as the biggest need right now? And what's your biggest focus within your business?
You, my thing is, I'm, really looking at how people are showing up emotionally
Mm,
and how that emotion translates to how they feel and how they perform.
mm,
And I think about people who are performing at a high level and they're dealing with a lot of stressors that
yes.
they don't know what to do with the stress. And so my job is to one, help you to recognize it. And two, let's come up with some skills and strategies to dismantle the stress and where you put it, because if you don't, it's going to show up in your body, and it
Mm,
shows up in all of it. If you are predisposed to something genetically, or if you've made it come about. And and then even good leaders, if they don't figure out how to dismantle that stress, they can lose some of their, make some bad decisions as a leader, and how they interact with people and how they talk to people and how they show up.
true.
So for me, I think that, and when you have a business, it's forever evolving. I started out wanting to do this just for educators, but I said, no, I want to do this for other people. And primarily, um, I really love working with women of color
Of
and
course.
women and younger people, younger adults, because
Hmm.
I think the beauty of young adults is that they're very open
Yes,
and they're willing to grow, and change is so much easier for them.
of
It's
course.
just that yeah, of course you're young, but the older you get, there's a lot more resistance. And so it has to be a point, like you get to a point in a certain age, you're like, God, I can't keep going to do this, but you
Right.
don't necessarily know how to move. So the coaching parts, and I do coaching, I love doing group work. And then I do group work with doing retreats, curated events, or working with school districts or with an organization with conferences, and giving themes and do pre-conference work with them to find out what it is that you want to talk to. And then we do a lot of work. We do a lot of reflection. We do a lot of movement. We do a lot of purging
Mm.
and replacing that with some positive
What is
some.
purging? What do you mean by that? Like,
So for example, when I purge, I like energy. I like this is the woo woo part of me. that the energy that we hold a lot of times in us, like, when you talk to somebody, you can see their disposition.
Yeah.
And sometimes that disposition is learned, sometimes it's just innate. And a lot of times that we have to purge some of our mindsets, our negative mindsets, and we need to purge some of the old thoughts that we have that block us, that keep us from moving ahead.
Mm.
And when you do things like we do Qigong, which is Tai Chi, is a form of martial art that's more combative. Like you fight when you do, like Kung Fu is a type of martial art where you fight. Qigong, you see them do these smooth movements, but they might have a weapon or they do this thing called push hands.
Mm.
But Qigong is just to calm the Qi, which is an energy that moves throughout your body. And there are hundreds of thousands of energy force fields that when you release the energy, you purge the block. The block
Mm.
allows it to run freely. I might go and get acupuncture to open up the block, the
Mm.
blockage of energy, so that you're more calm, you are able to be more, you can concentrate better, you can think about your process, and you're able to listen to what your body has to say. A lot of times we do a lot of internal fighting, but
Yeah.
the purging is to let go of that so that you can allow the more essential part of your core to open up so that you can be a lot much more at peace,
At
and be able
peace.
to perform, to be able to perform better. Like if you're in sales, you clearly will need to know how to purge some
Yeah.
of the tension and the stress that you hold in your body so that you can perform higher.
It almost sounds like there's a need to deconstruct or even re-regulate your nervous system. And you walk
It
around a
is your
lot of
nervous
times,
system.
it's like, why am I so much on edge? Somebody
Right.
almost bumps into me. Why do my fists clench up? Why do I feel
Right.
all of this stress off of minor inconveniences? Your body can't tell the difference between whether you're in a life danger situation or,
Exactly.
somebody, crossed you in the road. And so a lot
Hmm.
of times, to your point, we don't think to reset how we feel and how we react to things. It's like, hey, this is just how I am. But to your point,
Hmm.
there is a level of that, and like we mentioned before, through my travels and the things that I've seen, I'm like, wow, people's sense of personal space, reaction, hostility are completely different depending on how they were raised. You can see that in any community. But to your
Hmm.
point, these are just aspects and elements that people don't work on, and it can carry over to the workforce where even I catch myself, somebody on my team makes a mistake. How do I react?
You
Is my
want to jump
first
in
thought.
and throw.
Yeah, it's like, yo, what are you doing? Or versus, okay, why did this person make a mistake? I shouldn't be upset. It shouldn't bother. It shouldn't boil me at the point. And if it is, maybe I'm not being a great leader or the instruction isn't clear enough.
Right. So the power of pause is very important. The power of pause is to do just this. You just wait. You just stop and you wait. And because if you learn to pause, and then you need to learn how to ask clarifying questions,
Mm.
so there's a parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And so when you fight, your nervous system is coming at you. It is the stress response cycle. So when a stressor comes towards you, then your hormones start sending signals to your brain. I gotta fight because it's a defense mechanism. It's for safety. Now it
Yeah.
used to be you had to chase the lion, but now the lions are coming more frequently. So your body hasn't had a chance to really stop to deal with the last stress that you had.
Mm.
And then if you have another stress coming behind it, and then another one, you haven't stopped any of your stress cycles. So now
Mm.
you want to fight. Or either you want to freeze or you want to run away from the situation. And fine, you just tell everybody, yes, yes, you have whatever you want. So
Mm.
if you pause, and then when you learn how to stop the stress cycle, it really helps that your nervous system.
Mm.
So that becomes part of what we discuss about and you've been excellent, by the way, because you've just like, you're so connected to what I want to say. I don't even know how you did it, but it's like just perfect questions to ask so that I can, it's just what I talk about. And
Yes.
the nervous system is essential to how we show up in our workplace, and we have to work on calming it down.
Yes,
because
and
it is the highway to
mhm,
our life.
mm. I think sometimes, to your point, there tends to be a need to have a reaction or to make a next move, and sometimes the next move is no move. And a lot of
Mhm.
times we are digging our own grave by thinking we're, having motion, doing things. When it's like if we would just
Mhm.
simply stop doing half of the bad habits or half of the negative things that got us in the situation, we don't have to do anything new. Just stop doing a
Mhm.
little bit of what's not working,
Mhm.
or that pause and that reset, especially in these social situations. Somebody said this, somebody did that. It's like your
And we
brain
never
is like,
react.
what, you know?
And
Amazing,
so that's
amazing.
the awareness. That's where the awareness comes in as to who you are and
Mm,
studying yourself.
mm,
And those things that we take into the job place can also impact our evaluations, our
yeah,
performance. So you have to be a lot more astute and aware about who you are and how you're showing up. And it has
mm,
nothing to do with being black,
no,
It
yeah,
has nothing to do with being angry. It's just that, our perceptions are different,
right,
and you got to study the culture of the people that you work for.
true. That's a good point, especially if it's international, you know,
Mhm.
how they maneuver in France is going to be different than how the culture is
Oh
here in
yeah.
the US.
Mhm.
Speaking from experience there, but I
I'm
guess
talking about you going to Texas,
true,
if you're working in Texas,
true. The
New
North or the
York,
South, right? You're right.
California, yeah, Nebraska, even here,
You're right. Now, what is maybe one final piece of advice or just something that you want to leave with people that are maybe facing a career disappointment or they're just simply trying to find their way forward professionally? What's
Mhm.
something that you can leave with us today?
I really feel like I think that you need to take the time to recognize how you feel,
Mm,
learn more of who you are,
mm,
when you are out here, and don't beat yourself up.
mm.
Separate who you are from the job, and then and come up with a strategy, a plan, and definitely learn how to get out and talk to people, because you might meet your next employer in a coffee shop just by having a conversation with them. And
True.
do something out the ordinary, change up, and stay connected to yourself. Stay connected, be out and about, and don't be afraid to try something new. Please, that if I had to say anything, a lot of times we get stuck because we're only comfortable around certain kinds of people. We're only comfortable in this kind of environment. Get yourself out of the environments that you're in and learn how to show up in new places. If it's going to the museum, if it's going to a networking meetup, learn how to get out there and get outside of yourself and learn to talk to people.
I love that. And even your environment and your circle. Sometimes we may have to replace one loser friend for one winner friend. We love everybody, but the circle, our teams, like I use sports all the time. Every year in sports, they're changing coaches, they're changing players, and maybe do a
Hmm.
trade. They may change
Right.
the colors of the logo. But a lot of times in
Hmm.
our life, in our nervous system, at our job, we're not looking, at least look, to potentially make some different changes. I really enjoyed today's conversation. I've learned a lot, and I literally want to have another conversation at some point because I feel like we can keep going on and on. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the show. And then, how can people contact you or maybe look you up for those that are interested in working with you?
Oh, yeah. So you can connect with me. My website is www.coreessence, CORESSENCE by BYTB.com. So that's coreessence by TB.com.
Amazing. We'll
And
make
I'm
sure
on
we
LinkedIn.
tag
And I'm
that.
on LinkedIn. And I'm on LinkedIn.
Yes, tag the
Yes.
LinkedIn. We'll tag the
Yes. Yes.
LinkedIn.
Yes.
This literally
Definitely.
is live on LinkedIn now. So if you're watching this live, amazing. If you're watching it a week later or even a year later, we appreciate it and we can't wait to see what both of us are doing. And then thank you so much, and we will look forward to the next episode. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.
All righty.